Vietnam's first billionaire and the triumph of capitalism. Vietnam's real estate market had been frozen hard since crashing in 2011, with at least 13.5% of the country's $10 billion in real estate loans having gone bad. On a brilliant morning last October, Dung Khoi Street was closed for nearly 2 hours to celebrate the opening of Vincom Center. But Pham wasn't drinking any champagne, cutting any ribbons or giving any speeches. Rather, the 44-year-old quietly watched the ceremony from a front row seat. "I prefer sipping happiness by myself," Pham explains later. Pham's given name translates as prosperity, and he is often described as the Vietnamese Donald Trump. Still, Vietnam remains saddled with hundreds of inefficient state-run enterprises, rampant corruption and bouts of runaway inflation. The 8% a year growth of a decade ago is a distant memory, and an austerity policy is in full effect. Yet Pham's story personifies the post-Vietnam War story of this nation, a capitalistic achievement in a country that remains, nominally, communist. Pham was born in Hanoi in 1968, the same year as the Tet Offensive, the most momentous year that still shapes Vietnam today. His father served in the North Vietnamese Air Defense Force, his mother ran a sidewalk tea stand. While the North won the war and united the country, the national finances were in ruins, and the country's leaders were married to 5-year plans. Pham's family at one point survived solely on his mother's meager earnings. Pham escaped his circumstances through books. He proved himself something of a math prodigy, earning a scholarship to study the economics of raw material extraction at the Moscow Geological Prospecting Institute. The collapse of the Soviet Union had given way to a swirl of chaos. And back home, Vietnam had begun experimenting with market-based reforms within the ongoing socialist structure. After marrying his college sweetheart, Pham decided to remain abroad to try to take advantage of post-Soviet opportunities. The young couple made their way to another nation struggling in its capitalistic infancy, Ukraine. After scraping together $10,000 from family and friends, he opened a Vietnamese restaurant in Ukraine. Sensing a demand, he also began making and drying noodles using a production line imported from Vietnam. The concept of instant noodles was completely new to Ukrainians and an instant hit. So Pham took a risk. Rather than run a small noodle shop, he bet everything by borrowing money at a criminally high interest rate, and expanding his production. He primed the virgin market by producing 500,000 small packages, and giving them away with Vietnamese-themed calendars. The locals quickly became hooked on flavored instant noodles, and Pham became Ukraine's processed food king. This highly unconventional post-Soviet success story was about to get a twist. For years Pham had been slowly funneling the money from his Ukraine noodle empire back into projects in his homeland, in an attempt to create an even bigger post-communist fortune. At the turn of the millennium he took a trip to the beach city of Nha Trang. The economy was booming, Vietnam had dodged the 1997 Asian financial crisis, normalized trade relations with the U.S. and reaffirmed the economic role of the private sector. Between 2000 and 2006 Vietnam's GDP would grow at least 6% each year. Feeling the lift, Pham figured he would engage in a small local project. Why not turn the undeveloped island into a luxury resort? As his wealth grew, so did Pham's reputation. While he has acquired a few of the trappings of a billionaire, by all accounts, he lives modestly, watching martial arts movies rather than tooling around in his luxury car and sticking with vacations at his own resort. Yet as someone who had made money in Eastern Europe, stories have also abounded about shady connections and crooked money. Pham, who remains youthful and energetic. According to the rumors, "I've died at least 4 times in the last year," he says. The most recent story, "I have died because of cancer. I am doing this well, and they said I got cancer." So as a saying goes, the dogs bark, but the caravan goes on. I just need to focus on what I do,